Before I do get started, I wish to make a very sincere acknowledgement to the Wathaurong people of the Kulin Nations as well. Deakin has a very deep and lasting commitment in its partnership with the Wathaurong people, especially through the work that we do with the Institute of Career Education on our Warn Ponds campus. So we do repay our respects for them at all times for their care of the land. So, Leanne, I won't say any more about you. I think, we've got a very interesting and clear and confronting setting about what sustainability might look like and how it might be framed by universities, by institutions, and potentially by the higher education sector more generally. I have direct responsibility for our sustainability performance here at Deakin University as a member of the executive, but really it's through the work of Chris Jones, who's in the front row, and Emma Connor, and Michael, who's here as well. There he is up there, just sort of spreading our love around throughout the room. And I guess I've got a speech here that's been prepared for me, so I might just go right off that, because just to give you the sense of where we're coming from is that I guess the shift that we made a few years ago was, rather than making sustainability something special and something specific and something that then becomes a small and probably soft target in the funding and in the budgetary constraints of universities, we made it the accountability and the responsibility of the whole institution. So rather than it being something on the side, it was something core and fundamental to everything that we did. And the first thing that we did was to shift the definition of sustainability from coming from a simple, narrow environmental lens, which is absolutely critical but obvious, to bringing in the true definition, in my view, of sustainability, which is to understand the balance between the economic, the social, and the environmental dimensions. And by bringing those together, then all of our decision making takes all of those three factors into consideration. So we then start to bring a more sensible, more sustainable decisions for the long-term future of the university into play. So I might just go back to the speech just for a moment, but just with that context, and it would be interesting for you just to think about that from the various positions that you come from in your own institutions as to how you might start to change the conversation rather than have the same conversation in a more forceful and most likely a more combative way than has been had in the past. And you are in this beautiful town of Geelong at the waterfront, and I think this is a great picture of sustainability in its own right. A building built in the mid-1800s, and it's been totally repurposed over that period when it went into a period of a dereliction, if you like, for a number of years, but then renewed into a wonderful learning facility. And when we measure sustainability, just as a side point, we count the energy taken to make that original construction in any decision that we make for the future. So that really forces us, especially in our built environment, to start to think about the renewal of spaces rather than just let crappy old spaces be crappy old spaces and then we just go and build something new and shiny on the side. We have to account for the energy taken for the construction of that original space, and then that really forces us to think really carefully about how do we make an old space new rather than just make a new space. And that's a far more challenging design and construction idea than it is just to build something new, and I think this is a great example of that. And when you go for your run at 6:30 in the morning, just be careful because it is the Geelong Cup on today, and there might be, I'm not sure that it's even a short-term sustainability option for people to go down there. But just be careful when you're walking along the streets. You never know what you might find. It's all right, lighten up, everyone. It's okay. It'll be okay. But if it gets a little bit bland today, there is something a little bit more exciting down the road. If that's what you're up to. I won't tell anyone, I promise. So, just on the mega trends, as we like to think of them here at Deakin, that's confronting us today, I think sustainable development is absolutely one of those. So it's something that pervades the whole globe, not just our own industry, but I think that's a reasonably obvious thing. And bringing the economic, the social, the political and the cultural aspect into all of those discussions become a very profound discussion, a very complex one, and a very difficult one to solve. So trying to bring it into a simple frame, I think, is a very difficult and a foolhardy thing to do if we're going to make fundamental change. But there are definitely positive signs that just driving the bottom line as the ultimate goal is not going to get us there in the end. And to that end, Deakin has now reporting under the GRI index, one of few institutions in this country, I think only two, Chris? A few more than two.
It's increasing in this room.
It's increasing in this room. Come on board. I think it's a great way to go because it does bring a very holistic view about what sustainability looks like, but it does very much challenge the way in which we look at that concept more generally. So we've taken that very, very simply, but I think just to be in this environment for the moment and to look at some of the small things that we've done when we look at sustainable transport, for instance. We've got a campus that's only a 20-minute drive away. Now, we've saved in carpool, in fleet car travel, I think 2 trips to the moon and back in the last few years by changing the way we look at. We don't allow our staff just to drive around at random in fleet cars, and we have reduced our fleet cars enormously, and we've replaced that with things like a really simple thing called a shuttle bus between this campus and the Warn Ponds campus. Now, the local council said, oh, there's no demand for that, we can't see the evidence, we can't see the data, and the reason why I'm saying this is sometimes it's intuitive. And Chris and his team said, we just reckon if we gave someone a better option that was sustainably framed, then people might actually choose to do that. So inside 12 months of starting that particular initiative, by providing the social sustainability, if you like, the convenience, the frequency, all of those sorts of things, there's now been 100,000 commutes inside 12 months. So it is the busiest public transport route in Geelong. And people are choosing it because it works. It makes more sense than having cars lying around all day when all people want to do is just get back and forward to campus. Actually quicker and it's more frequent. And we've found a car park in between the two campuses that doesn't get used during the week. It only gets used on the weekends. So people can park there free and then get on the shuttle bus, so we don't have to go and build more and more car spaces at what is now costing us between $50,000 and $60,000 a car space to construct. So when people just say, we need more parking, do they need more parking or do they need an easier way to get to and from the campus and between campuses? So I think if you look at a slightly more holistic view, just on something as simple as that, getting from one campus to another, there can be extraordinary gains made from an environmental perspective, so we can demonstrate how we have vastly reduced the carbon footprint. From a social perspective, we've actually made something more convenient, more flexible and easier to use for our students and our staff, and economically sensible in that it's costing us as a university far less to get a much better result than we ever did. And then you put some things around the fringe and to say, well, let's put in some bike sheds. Well, let's not make it a shed. Let's make it a transit hub. Let's make it something that isn't grubby and dirty and an afterthought. Let's actually turn it into something spectacular where you can have a shower, blow dry your hair if you're into that. I'm okay without the blow dry, but you know, some people like that, an ironing board and an iron and all of the capacity to fix a punctured tyre. And all of a sudden, you've created a zone where people think, gee, I actually hadn't thought about riding to work before. And the increase that we have for staff and students now riding to work has gone up like a rocket because we've made it something that's socially sustainable, socially attractive, something that works just personally. And the outcome, if you like, is the environmental impact that we're ultimately going for. So just a few little ideas like that you might want to think that don't apparently seem all that obvious or significant enough to be worth it, but you put it all together and it makes a very, very big difference. And I just before I close, I'll just give you one other story about Deakin where I had a conversation with our council about, this is about serious budget. It's about how much physical infrastructure are we going to build between now and 2020. And we had a number that looked like about $1.5 billion or something like that. And council said, well, to be financially sustainable, we're not prepared to go into debt. Deakin has no debt. And we're not prepared to contemplate that just to go and build new stuff. So we had to really think about how we create infrastructure for the fastest growing university in the country for the last 5 years in student numbers, and how we accommodate that space. And by the redesign of space under one concept, one single concept from I own to we share. This is not my space, this is our space, and I can use it for fit for purpose for the reasons that I need it, when I need it, but when I don't, someone else can. Really, really, really simple stuff. So if we were going to build new space just to create the capacity that we needed under the old thinking, we needed to build $1.5 billion. Under a new regime, we only need to build $1 billion. And that comes down to the renewal of space first, and then the additional space when we need it, but under different terms. So all of these ideas about open plan and all that sort of stuff, there's a big social argument going on about the validity of an academic having to have 14 square metres with 4 walls and a door and a lock, by the way, so that when they go on study leave for 9 months, they have the right to lock the door, lock people out of their space, and no one else can use it. Absolutely ridiculous. So if you're going to have a serious conversation about sustainability, look at the stuff that's going to give you the biggest economic gains, and then budget then becomes no conversation at all. So we have been able to measure a $300 million economic gain in the last 3 years. Now that is a bigger gain than any initiative about anything in a university, but it actually funds the opportunity to do things a whole lot better than what we did in the past. Under one concept, I own to we share. And we will expect to get that economic gain up to 500 million between now and about 2017. And that 500 million, guess what is the difference between the billion that we will spend and the $1.5 billion of the benefit that we need, that we will actually gain. So $500 million economic gain over about 6 or 7 years, I reckon is worth going for. And then we don't have to worry about sustainability budgets because it just happens. Thank you.